So now we're going to work on the messages, and we're going to be saving messages in the database in a collection. So I think the first thing that we should do is create a new model for messages. So let's go to models, create a new file called message.js, and then from here we're going to bring in schema. We're going to do this just like we did with the other models. So schema, model, models. And that's going to be from, whoops, I don't want const here, we want import. So we want to import from Mongoose. And then let's create our schema. So const, we'll call this message schema. And that's going to be set to a new schema. And then we pass in an object that has all of the fields. So here's the fields that we're going to have. We're going to have a few object ID fields that are related to another table. So for instance, we're going to have a sender of the message, and the sender is going to be obviously the user that sends the message, that sends that form that's on the property page. So let's say type, and that's going to be schema.types. That should be uppercase. So types dot and then object ID. That's the type. Then we also want a ref to reference the collection or the model that we want, which is user. And then we want required to be true. All right, so that's the first one, and we can just take that and copy it down because we also want the recipient. So let's say recipient, and that's also going to be an object ID from the user and true. Then we also want a property. We could probably just copy this down again. So this is going to be the specific property that is being inquired about. That's going to be an object ID, except this time the ref is going to be the property model, and we'll keep that at required true as well. So that's kind of stuff that is going to be set automatically. So when someone comes to a page, they'll submit this form, and that stuff will be sent automatically based on the user that's in the session and based on the property owner. The property owner will be the recipient, and the person sending will be the sender. And obviously the property is the property. Now these fields, name, email, phone, and then message, so we do need to add those. So let's add name, and name is going to be type string. And we could make it so we get the name from the sender, but what if it's an account that isn't that person? So I want them to be able to put their own name and email. Same thing with the email address. So for the name, let's say required. And I want this to be required, so we'll put an array with true, and then the message of name is required. Okay, I'll just copy that down. So that will be email and string. Okay, then let's do phone. Now phone I'm not going to make required, so we'll just say type string. And then we'll have a body. So basically this will be the message body. And we won't make that required either. So string. Hey guys, real quick, this is Brad from the future. So I actually had forgotten this field. So you also want to add red, because later on we want to be able to mark our messages as red and be able to unmark them as red. So you need this field as well. Just make sure that you make it a type Boolean and you add a default value of false. So when a message is created, it'll automatically have red false. All right, so back to your regularly scheduled program. And let's do timestamps just like we did with all of our other models. So here, make sure you put these curly braces after this curly brace, not after this one. Okay, so it's just a separate argument. And then in here, let's say timestamps, and we'll set that to true. Okay, then let's come down here and we'll say const message, uppercase M, equals, let's say models dot uppercase M message, or model, and then we're going to pass in message and the message schema. Oops, message schema. And then we just want to export default message. All right, so that's our model. So the next thing I want to do in this video is for the form, we already have that in its own component, right? We have a property contact form, which is right here. So why don't we start to just add the state values for the inputs. So up at the top, let's make it client. So use client, and then we're going to bring in use state. And then let's come in here. I do want to add the property because I believe we're passing that in. Let's just check the page real quick. So if we go to app and then properties and then ID and then page JSX, where we have the property contact form, you should have the property being passed in here as a prop. So that means that we have to catch it right here. And then as far as the state goes, let's do the name. So name, set name. And then I'll just copy that down a few times. And then we're going to have email. And then we'll have message. And then what else do we want? Phone. And we're also going to have a was submitted. So const was submitted, set was submitted, and that's going to be set to false by default. All right, now let's come down and let's add the values and the handlers to the form fields. So this is the name field. So we'll add on chain. Let's do value first. So value, and that's going to be set to the name state. And then for the on change, very simple. We're just going to put a function in here with an event, and then we're going to call set name and pass in the e.target.value. And we're going to do that for all these fields. So I'm going to copy these two lines. We'll go to the next one, which is email. Paste that in and just change that and that to email. Then we have the phone. So that and that to phone. And then for, let's see, for the message, that and that message. Okay, and then let's see, let's add the on submit. So the form tag itself will have an on submit, and let's set that to handle submit. Now I only want to show the form if it hasn't been submitted. So once we actually do submit it, we're going to set this value to true. So what we'll do is go under the H3, and I'm going to open up some curly braces and say was submitted, and then use a ternary. So was submitted something else, something else. And if it was submitted, then let's add in here a paragraph. So we'll do paragraph with a class name of text-green-500 and then MB-4. And in that paragraph, we'll just say your message has been submitted. or your message has been sent successfully. And then in these parentheses, we want the entire form. So I'm just going to cut that. And then we're going to put that in here. Okay, so if I save, we should still see the form because it hasn't, what's this? Handle submit isn't defined. So we just need to define that real quick. So const handle. All right, so the form's there. Now, if I were to change this value to true for was submitted, then we should see that. So after they submit, they'll see that message. We'll also show a toast as well, but let's put that back to false. And then for now, let's just get the data and show, we'll just console log it. So in the handle submit, let's pass in event, and then we'll do e.prevent default to prevent the default behavior, and then we'll build a data object with the name, email, message, or email, phone, message, and then the recipient. So the recipient is going to be the owner. So we have access to the property, which means we have access to the owner field. And then we also need the property itself, which is going to be the property object and then the underscore ID field. All right, so now let's just do a console log of that data. All right, so we'll come over here and let's just fill this in. I'll say John at Gmail. Okay, so we're going to submit this, and let's check the console. We have an object with the email, message, name, phone, property ID, and recipient ID, which is exactly what we want. And I mean, after we submit it, we also want to set was submitted to true. That way it gives us some feedback. So if I try that again, there we go. All right, cool. So what we'll do next is create the API route for us to send the message.